Welcome to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Kentucky attorney Jeff Roberts has over 25 years of experience. He'll provide answers to your questions related to personal injury and automobile accidents, workers' compensation claims, and Social Security disability benefits. Let's join Jeff for this episode. And we are back with injury attorney Jeff Roberts in Murray, Kentucky, down here in Calloway County. Jeff, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. So today, why don't we kind of shift gears a little bit, and why don't we just talk about some injuries that typically would happen to the shoulder and the arm. I think we'll probably get all the way to the down to the hand and fingers by the end of the episode. But if you just can visualize, okay, we're really today going to focus on shoulder, arm, hand injuries. And Jeff, these can happen in both car wrecks, which you handle, car, motorcycle, trucking collisions, things like that. But they can also happen in workplace injuries.
Exactly. You can see both of these in different types, in both of those types of accidents. If it's a work injury or a car wreck, you can have upper extremity injuries, starting at the shoulder. Frequently, especially from the work injury standpoint, people who do a lot of overhead lifting and working where they've got their hands up over their head, frequently you'll see them develop rotator cuff problems. Have represented lots of clients who do that type of work, develop rotator cuff tears over time, or it could be a specific injury. Lifting one, heavy item up, one local factory, people have to lift 55-pound bags of material and dump it in, and you'll see them end up with a rotator cuff tear. There was one job, I think, hopefully they've changed it around on how they did it, because it's like 4 people in a row that did that job had rotator cuff tears, and they ended up representing them in a workers' compensation claim. So hopefully they changed that job around to where that doesn't occur anymore from there. But you see that frequently in a work injury setting is a rotator cuff tear occurring. And, in car wrecks, you can see rotator cuff tears there where people brace themselves if they know what's coming, and it kind of jars in that regard. And occasionally you'll see, depending on all the factors involved in the wreck, a clavicle fracture.
That collarbone area.
The collarbone area, which is technically not the shoulder, but it connects to the shoulder in that regard. And you will have fractures in that area, which can be, sometimes requiring surgery and even plates or something like that to hold it in place. In other times, if it's not displaced, they can just let it heal on its own from that. So you end up with those type of things up in the shoulder area. When I say rotator cuff, you've got labrum tears and all of those things. I'm kind of lumping, even though they're separate, I'm kind of lumping them all together in there. Frequently with tears, if it's not too bad, then they can, do some therapy and let it kind of heal. But frequently with significant tears in the shoulder, the person's going to end up with a rotator cuff repair.
Yeah, and that's going to be a long recovery. So in a workers' comp standpoint, at least at their time off work and their lost wages and the medical, all that's going to be covered. When you get into those kind of situations, we've always said in all of these different podcast episodes dealing with workers' comp specifically, you have to notify your employer, and that's one of those first humps. And I know that doesn't really flow with this conversation, but I want to put it in there because people could actually be barred from bringing a claim if they don't let somebody know at work, hey, this was work related.
Yes, that's absolutely 100% correct. It's what I refer to as a threshold issue. It's an issue you have to get over to be able to recover anything in that workers' compensation claim. So if you do not give due and timely notice, and there's not a set time frame, I know some employers tried to say that, well, you've got to notify us within 24 hours of the injury. That's not what Kentucky law is. You don't have to do that. You have to give due and timely notice, and the facts of each case are different. So if you're working, doing a lot of work and lifting and your shoulder gets sore, and that's on Friday, and then it kind of gradually gets worse over the weekend, and you're off, and then Monday you go back, and it's really hurting you, and then you say something. Well, you're 3 or 4 days later, and you're still fine in giving notice. You go, if you think it's just a sore muscle and you don't really think it's anything tore and you wait a week or two, you're probably still perfectly fine in that regard. I don't think I've ever lost a notice case where they've had notice within 2 weeks of the accident occurring from there. So, but it is a hurdle, and the sooner you give notice, the much better you are from that standpoint.
Well, I know in dealing with shoulder injuries, one of the other issues that could come up is the onset of arthritis. And arthritis is not just an age-related thing, right? I mean, if you do a repetitive motion, if you're constantly moving your shoulders, maybe you're lifting something up over your head on a consistent basis or working with your arms up like that, you can actually cause the acceleration of arthritis, and that is actually covered under workers' comp in some cases.
Correct. It can be if the repetitive activities cause the arthritis or aggravate the arthritis, then that can, in fact, be a covered work-related injury. And what I have seen in workers' comp especially, but in any type of shoulder, in any joint injury for that matter, when you injure a joint, the arthritis is going to develop, at least based on my experience. I'm not a doctor, so I'm not giving anybody medical advice, but after doing this for 32, nearly 33 years now, my experience is if you injure a joint, you're going to have arthritis develop much quicker in that injured joint than you are in the non-injured joint. So if and I've seen this with people who are right-handed and they injure their left shoulder. Well, they use their right arm more than they do their left arm because they're right-handed. But a year later, the arthritis in that left shoulder is significantly worse than what it is in the right shoulder, and that's because it had suffered that injury. And you see that, I see that with just nearly any joint. If you injure that joint, you're going to hasten the arthritis development in that joint, at least from my experience.
Well, as we continue to the discussion, and we're kind of moving down the arm from the shoulder, did you have something else on the shoulder?
Yeah, I was going to say that's one of the reasons on the workers' comp claim. One of the reasons when you resolve that claim, unlike other cases, you can leave medical open so that your medical is taken care of into the future for at least a period of time in workers' comp, up to, 15 years up to lifetime, depending on the type of injury you suffered. But that's one of the reasons why you want to keep that medical left open, is because if you resolve the claim now, well, 5 years from now, you may need another shoulder surgery because of the arthritis that's developed in there. And if you left the medical open, then the workers' comp insurance should take care of that surgery and take care of the time that you're off work recuperating from that surgery and pay you for that period of time as well. And I see people who don't lock in those benefits for the future at times, and it can. I've had several folks I've talked to that wish they had done that. I've had some that I've advised you don't want to settle your future medical, and they wanted that they paid enough money that they decided to do that, and then they come back later and said, "Should have took your advice. I'm gonna have to have more surgery, and I didn't anticipate that." Even though I had told them that was a possibility. So you have that situation, and I've had others that were either unrepresented. Usually a lot of times they're unrepresented, they don't lock those in, and then they come back regretting it later on when they come in to see me 4 or 5 years later, and there's nothing I can do about it at this point. So.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate because, that's going to be a lot of pain and a lot of expense down the road that they're going to have to contend with somehow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, as we're moving down the length of the arm there, you kind of get into the bicep and the humerus, that bone right there. I've actually seen somebody that gets an injury where they've actually kind of torn their bicep, which is just a horrible. I can't imagine having that done, but I've seen it, and it's horrendous. But sometimes lifting a heavy object or stuff like that, I guess it's the ligaments and things like that, and actually it's part of the muscle fiber.
Right. Yeah, I've represented several folks who've had torn biceps, some that where they tore it completely loose. And they come in, and it's just very odd looking because, the the entire bicep is all down around the elbow because
Kind of
it's
Popeye
pulled
looking.
down.
Yeah.
It's very similar to that. It's down in that area because it's detached from where it attached to the shoulder area. So it's all balled up down there, and then they have to. Usually, they will pull it back up and then reattach it, the drill and put anchors in to hold it in place.
Little duct tape.
Do what?
Little duct tape.
Little duct tape. That's little duct tape, WD-40 duct tape, and that'll fix it. So,
you're not a physician. Let's state that for the record.
Yeah, I'm not giving medical advice, but that's so you've got those type of injuries that occur. Again, I see that kind of like the rotator cuff. I do see rotator cuff tears occasionally in car wrecks and all, but I see the bicep tendon tears, ruptured biceps, more in a work injury setting as well. Now, the broken bones, it tends to be more from a car wreck. That's the direct trauma to that. Now, sometimes somebody falls at work or something, and they can break a bone as well. But usually the broken bones is more from not from a lifting, but from trauma, direct blow to the arm in that regard.
Yeah, I could see. I mean, if you've got your arms down beside you and you get T-boned, that impact is going right on that humerus, and you know that's not that big of a bone, really, for that kind of a force. But so as we're moving on down, we now kind of get into the elbows, and that's as you said earlier, that's a joint, right? So you've got some arthritis that come through that. You've also got those ligaments and tendons in that area that can get inflamed, and then you got some other kind of pain that just kind of sticks around for a while.
True. You have that. You can injure that joint just like any other joint. And one thing that I've seen, especially if you have a significant injury to the elbow or the shoulder, either one, if you have to have surgery on that, there's an old saying. I assume it's still around. I know it was around when you and I were growing up, is no pain, no gain. And that was really talking about lifting, and I understand what it was referring to, but I've seen that to be 100% the case with shoulder and elbow injuries in physical therapy. The people who go to therapy and push as hard as the therapist wants. You don't do anything greater than what the therapist wants you to do, but who go in there and push themselves with the guidance of the therapist, a year later in a whole lot better situation than the ones who slack off in therapy. They don't do the at-home exercises. They tend to have a lot greater problems down the road than those who push themselves out there. And that's I tell clients frequently and family members that have those type of things that, remember that adage and do your therapy, do it at home, do what the therapist tells you to do. And even if it hurts, you're going to have soreness and all of that. And if it's excessive soreness or pain, tell the therapist about it, tell your doctor about it. But you're probably going to be in much better shape 6 months from now than you will be if you don't.
Well, I think that's a great point, because a lot of people kind of get to feeling better and they think, well, I don't need to kind of continue this, even though the doctor or the physical therapist, asked me to keep doing these exercises at home. And suddenly that pain or that problem can come roaring back. And I would think the insurance company could say, well, you kind of violated doctor's orders here, so we're not as much on the hook as we should be. I mean, does that ever come up?
In workers' comp, if you fail to follow doctor's orders without reasonable grounds, that can affect what you recover in the claim. So yes, that can come up in that situation. And I've seen, I've had cases where they've tried to deny further procedures for that. A lot of times with shoulder, for instance, you'll get adhesive capsulitis, which is sometimes referred to as frozen shoulder, where you're not able to move the arm. And it's kind of a scar tissue buildup, et cetera, that can cause that. And they'll put the person under anesthesia and then do a manipulation under anesthesia is what they call it, and take it through and basically loosen up and break that scar tissue, loosen it up, and then start the person in therapy again after that to keep things going. And I've had times where the person missed a lot of therapy after the first surgery had those problems with the frozen shoulder or adhesive capsulitis, and the insurance company balked at wanting to pay for the manipulation under anesthesia, saying that they kind of brought it on themselves by not doing what they were supposed to be doing. So you can face that in workers' comp for sure.
Yeah, and that just kind of once again kind of compounds the whole situation. You're already in pain. You're already having some trouble, and then to have a claim denied or a treatment denied, it's got to be frustrating. And I know
Yes.
over the last 32, almost 33 years now, you've probably had those conversations with a few clients.
I've had those conversations at times, and it's not most time we're able to work around it and get it taken care of from that standpoint, but it delays things.
Yeah, and a delay in that kind of treatment really just prolongs the pain.
Correct.
I could imagine.
Exactly.
So, Jeff, as we're moving down below the elbow here, we kind of get into that regular arm there. And I would imagine in car wrecks, those two bones there get broken fairly easily. If I'm pushing up to kind of brace myself against the dash or something like that, I could see those little bones in your forearm there getting snapped pretty easily.
Yeah, you see the bigger bones, radius and ulna bone, being snapped there. But what I see as well, and I think is actually, depending on how bad the breaks are in those bones, they can be very, very severe. What I see frequently too is the bones in the wrist, the carpal bones in the wrist, get injured, fractured, or dislocated in that regard. And as far as long-term consequences, a lot of times that's much greater problems than a fracture of the radius or something, depending on where the fracture is, obviously, and how bad the fracture is. But if, they can heal up without any long-term problems. If you damage those carpal bones in your wrist, I've had clients who've had significant injuries there, and every movement of the wrist is painful, and they've had to have some of the bones removed at times. And so that's, and that surgery is I see that, and you have at least my experience is that tends to cause people problems for well into the future. Wow. When they have those type of injuries to the wrist. So
you got to think about it. I mean, the radius and ulna bone there in your forearm, they don't flex, so once they fuse back together, they've got a good chance of recovering. You're there, you got some pain, but you're okay. A lot of kids break them in grade school and high school football and stuff like that. That happens. Mm-hmm. But that wrist, you use that for so many different motions every day. Mm-hmm. So if there's just a tinge of pain, it's just getting worse and worse over time. One of the things that we've talked about in the past is carpal tunnel.
Yes.
When you've got repetitive motion, that can be a secretary, that could be an office administrator who does a lot of typing, somebody that's in IT or whatever, because you've got that weird motion with your wrist when you're typing, all the way to somebody that's using a power tool or an air tool on a day-to-day basis,
right.
Over time, that's got to wear that down.
Yeah, you see carpal tunnel develop a lot. And what some people don't realize is there's more than just the carpal tunnel. The carpal tunnel is at the wrist area, but you up near the elbow, you have the cubital tunnel. And that can cause people, you can have the impingement at the cubital tunnel, and you have similar types of pain, only it goes higher up at that point. But so there's more areas that you can have that pinch of a nerve going through a narrow area in the bones or whatever, which is what the carpal tunnel is. But that does, if you have carpal tunnel, that affects your hands significantly in your use of the hands there. My experience is with carpal tunnel, if it's bad enough to require surgery, that's usually a very successful surgery, at least in my experience. The people I've represented who've had carpal tunnel surgery tend to do well from it. Not everybody does, but at least statistically, it's in my practice, that tends to be one of the more successful surgeries that people have. So
no, that's good. And then again, continuing down to the fingertips, you've got all of those bones there. Your metacarpals, I think is what they're called, mm-hmm. between your wrist and that first row of knuckles, and then you've got all your finger joints and things like that. That in a workplace scenario, there are a lot of injuries to that. Depending on the type of work you do, and also in a car wreck, really.
Yeah, I've seen. Recently, I've seen, it seems to me, more car wrecks that's resulted in fractures of the hand and wrist area than, I've had probably 4 of those in the last year anyway. And that's something that seems to be, I don't know why that seems to be occurring, but I probably hadn't seen 1 or 2 a year prior to that, and in the last year I've seen a lot more from that, and I'm not understanding the correlation from why that's occurring more frequently there, but and it just but those bones, if you break those bones, depending on how bad and where it is, if you're in the joint, you're going to have arthritis develop in those finger joints. Or I've got, unfortunately, some clients who's had severe fractures and severe injuries to ligaments in their hand from a car accident or work injuries from as well, that have significantly decreased motion even after surgery, because it's just the tendons and the scar tissue, they just can't move those fingers like they'd done it in the past. So.
Well, I would think you could also have a diminished grip strength, so you're not able to hold on to that tool like you should, or some other object.
And that can be a huge factor on whether somebody can go back to work that does heavy manual labor. If they injure the hands and wrists, then they lose that grip strength. If they're a factory worker where they're using their machines, they may not be able to go back and do that. Or if they're a union carpenter or union laborer or iron worker, that going back and doing those jobs can be very, very difficult and very painful if you had an injury to those, to any of the joints in the hands or wrists. From that standpoint, so it can be severely disabling to some folks.
Yeah, we think so. And in previous episodes, we've also talked about the fact that you handle Social Security disability claims, and sometimes, depending on the severity of these injuries, there may actually be a disability claim that has to be filed, which you can handle, whether it's a car wreck or workers' comp or SSDI type claim.
Yeah.
And you can do those at the same time, which I always found interesting.
Yes, yeah, you can have a car wreck, workers' comp, and Social Security all going on at the exact same time from that standpoint. And yeah, I do handle all of those from that there, but it's rare that you have 3 going on at once, but it's certainly possible to have 3 if you're on the job driving when you have the wreck, and it's severe enough of a wreck, it can result in total disability and Social Security disability claim, as well as the workers' comp and the car wreck case from that perspective. So another thing that I see occasionally in car wrecks, but much more frequently in work injuries, is a person losing their fingers or part of their fingers. And I actually unfortunately, I've had a few people who've had their entire hand amputated from a work injury, or arm. And so you have those type of injuries that are devastating to folks.
Yeah, and I know, we were talking about it right before we got into the episode. Down here in Western Kentucky, we're getting ready to walk into harvest season, and you've got a lot of big machinery going on, getting ready to hit the fields. And, the risk of amputation and things like that are it spikes. And those are horrible accidents when you get caught in a piece of machinery. And that can happen in a plant. I mean, obviously, but when you're out in the field, other things can happen too. And that's a bad situation.
Yeah. If you get an article of clothing or body part called into a PTO,
long hair,
you get called into PTO, you're going to have problems from that standpoint. People, the one that comes to mind where they amputated their hand, they were using a chop saw, and the wood jumped, and they cut their hand off. Luckily, it was. It's amazing what they can do in surgery now. There's a group out of Louisville that are somewhat, I don't know. Pioneered, I wouldn't say, it may not be the right word, but they're leading doctors on hand and arm surgery up there. And the client in that case flew up there, and they were able to reattach the hand, and it was their left hand is what got cut off. They were right-handed, and they cut their left hand off. And I saw the gentleman after we resolved everything, and it's probably 6 years later, I saw him out at a restaurant, and talked with him, and he was actually doing construction work then. He got 80% of his use back out of that hand, which was amazing to me.
That is, medicine these days is just absolutely amazing. What these surgeons are capable of doing is just, wow. You kind of sit back sometimes and like.
Yeah, in that case, that group did it, and it was very interesting because they used his. They life flighted him up there, so he got there in plenty of time, and they used his as a teaching tool.
Yeah.
So during the procedure, they took pictures the whole time of what they were doing, and I got those, and it's very, very odd looking at those photos, but it was interesting. But I mean, all the work that went into reconnecting the nerves, of the blood vessels, all of that stuff. It was just, it's amazing what they were able to do.
Well, and that's actually a good segue into kind of how I'd like to wrap up the episode here is, nerve damage. A lot of people don't think about nerve damage. We think about bones and muscles, but the nerves, running all throughout that arm, a significant trauma like that, you can actually come into a whole bunch of different issues where now I just can't move the hand. I can't move the arm. I can't raise the shoulder. And it's maybe not muscular, it's actually a nerve issue.
Right, exactly. If you damage the nerves, it has a lot more impact than some people realize, because, every movement is your brain traveling the sensations through the nerve to tell your hand to close or whatever it is you're doing. Every movement that you make that travels through a nerve at some point in time to get to the body part that you're asking it to move. And so if you damage that, it affects your ability to use that extremity, whatever body part it is. But even more than that, depending on the severity of it, you can lose some of your protective sensation.
Yeah.
And people don't think about that. But if you if you severely damage your hand, and I've had clients who have damaged nerves going to the hand, and they'll cut themselves and not know until they see blood, they have no idea that they've cut themselves.
Yeah.
And I mean, significant cuts, and they just didn't know it. I mean, it was something.
No feeling, no sense,
Exactly.
No sense of, hey, I've done this.
Right.
Until you look down. Yeah. Oh, that's going to be horrible. I mean, I didn't even think about that. A few episodes ago, we did an episode on filing claims for PTSD, and the way I'm going to connect this is that I've got to think that if you've got nerve damage, that's not an injury you can really see, and that's got to be like a head injury, like a traumatic brain injury. It's not visible to the average person sitting across from you until something happens where, oh, this person doesn't have memory, or this person isn't really connecting the dots in the conversation. But with the nerve damage, again, there's a psychological factor to that as well. Other people think, oh, you're just kind of, it can't be that bad, but these can be traumatic. These can be life-changing injuries. Oh,
they can be, and then they can trigger into even worse or even other problems. There is a condition, CRPS, chronic regional pain syndrome.
Yep.
Was called RSD when I first started practicing. They've changed it to CRPS now. But a lot of times that starts from sometimes they don't know what causes it, but a lot of times it starts from an injury to the nerve, and then the body overcompensates, and what those people who suffer from that condition go through, I've represented several people with that, and they're miserable.
Yeah, I mean, years and years ago, I did a lot of marketing to that type of case for another firm, and it's not only that sensitivity issue, but it feels like it's on fire sometimes within the skin. So you've got that constant level of pain, which is hard to describe, and it's hard to understand if you're dealing with somebody that's got that.
Yeah.
But it's also the way the skin can change. I mean, it's a weird. Yes. The onset is just the way it presents can be really, really strange.
It's that's a very odd injury or condition.
And it started with a nerve trauma.
Yeah. I mean, just a shirt, if it's in your arm, the shirt resting on it is extremely painful to people. But then you also have changes, as you talked about. Your skin will change colors, the hair growth will change, your nail growth will change. Yep. From that condition. There's a lot of different aspects to that condition that you don't think about from a natural standpoint coming from an injury. Somebody injures a nerve in their arm, you wouldn't think, okay, this is going to affect my nail growth or going to affect my skin color or anything of that nature, but it can and does. It's the sympathetic nervous system that's kind of its own hyper alert is basically from what I've been told by doctors.
That sounds right from what I did.
Exactly. Yeah. It's hypersensitive. So, just any touch, and sometimes just a fan blowing on it can be painful to people, because the protective sensation, the nerves that that tell us this is hot, this is that's painful, that's a pinprick or whatever, it just fires on all cylinders all the time, and it's just they're doing better on some of the treatments for that now. But it is very, very difficult condition.
Well, back in the day, just to get a doctor to actually diagnose it as CRPS or whatever it was, just RSD back in the day as well, just getting a doctor who was willing to say, yeah, I think this is what we're gonna diagnose it as. It was hard, so I just couldn't imagine the pain and the trauma these people go through. But I know that we're kind of in a rabbit hole here, obviously. But
you're correct in getting the good diagnosis of that, and also finding a doctor that treats it. There's just not a lot of doctors who treat that condition locally, or there didn't used to be. There may be more now that do that, but it was very difficult. I know I had one client of mine that had to go to Chicago to get treatment for the condition, and actually did decent with it after that compared to what other folks I'd had that didn't have any treatment were able to have. So,
boy, I could not imagine having to live with that. That would be horrendous. Jeff, I appreciate your time here. We talk a lot about these injuries, and you're licensed in the state of Kentucky, so you can actually handle cases. We're obviously in Murray today. We talked about Hopkinsville up there, but you can also handle cases in northern Kentucky and central Kentucky and all the way out to eastern Kentucky with this, right?
I can. I handle workers' compensation and car wreck, motorcycle wreck cases all over Kentucky from that standpoint. So it doesn't matter where you're at. If you want to meet with me, I travel quite a bit. That's part of what I do in my practice. So I'm in Louisville, Lexington, Frankfort, Bowling Green, and all of those locations. I meet clients there when I'm traveling to those areas, or we can meet by video conference, phone, do a lot of stuff through email. So if you have any questions, you've got a case you want to talk to me about, doesn't matter where you're at, you can give me a call. Phone number, I do have two offices, one in Hopkinsville and one in Murray, but I have one phone number, and that's 270-753-0053, and you can give me a call from that standpoint, and then we'll be happy to talk with you and see what we can do for you. I know we've mentioned this before, but I do have a motto for my office. It's we provide small town service and deliver big city results, and we strive to live up to that in every case.
Outstanding. Jeff, it's been good sitting with you here today, and we'll be back in about 2 weeks.
Okay. Good to see you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Jeff will return in 2 weeks. Until then, he invites you to visit jeffrobertslaw.com and follow his firm on Facebook. At the Roberts Law Office, you'll find a history of small town service and big city results.